Silas Ward's horse trudged wearily along the winding dirt road as the autumn sun dipped low behind the jagged Wyoming foothills. The cool air bit gently at his face, carrying the faint scent of pine needles and smoldering wood from distant campfires. Somewhere nearby, the haunting call of coyotes wove through the stillness, echoing across the untamed stretch of wilderness that had long been silent, save for the whispers of wind through dry grass and cracked earth. Ahead, the silhouette of a weathered ranch house emerged from the shadows, its porch strangely alive with the presence of 7 women. Each woman clutched a crisp photograph, an exact likeness of Silas, a face he barely recognized as his own. The images were not faded relics from a forgotten past, but recent portraits, sharp and vivid. Silas's heart tightened with unease and curiosity. Who were these women? And why were they waiting here beneath the open Wyoming sky, holding his image like a sacred token? Silas was a man shaped by solitude. His hands, calloused from years of hard work in distant towns, trembled slightly as he urged his horse forward. He was the grandson of a man he scarcely remembered, the heir to a ranch said to have been abandoned for decades. Yet everything before him told a different story. Smoke curled steadily from the chimney, and clothes hung neatly on lines swaying in the chill breeze. This place had life, and it had stories. Stories he was only beginning to grasp. The eldest woman, her silver hair braided down her back, stepped forward with a quiet strength that commanded attention. Her eyes, deep and knowing, met Silas's with a mixture of urgency and welcome. "You're late, Silas," she said softly. "We weren't sure you'd come at all." Her voice carried the weight of long-held promises and silent waits. Silas swallowed hard. The law had spoken of empty fields and forgotten dreams, but here was proof that someone had guarded this land and its secrets with fierce loyalty. What had his grandfather hidden from him? Why had these women kept his image so close? And why did the past seem to stir just as the cold Wyoming dusk settled? If you love tales of grit, redemption, and love that lasts, subscribe to Dust and Destiny now and ride with us to the very end. Silas dismounted slowly, his worn boots crunching against the gravel driveway as the chill of the Wyoming evening settled deep into the air. The weight of the moment pressed on him, heavier than the saddle he had carried through countless miles. His gaze shifted between the 7 women clustered on the porch, their faces a mixture of hope, suspicion, and something harder to read: expectation. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he began, his voice steady but laced with caution. "I think there's been some mistake. I just inherited this place. I've never been here before." The silver-haired woman who seemed to lead the group stepped forward. Her smile softened, no longer sharp but touched with empathy. "Your grandfather said you'd say that," she replied quietly. "That you wouldn't remember, at first. But he promised you'd come back, when the time was right." Silas's brow furrowed as he took a hesitant step closer. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning he did not yet understand. He noticed a younger woman with piercing green eyes clutching one of the photographs of him tightly, as if it were a lifeline. She spoke then, voice edged with urgency. "If you're really him, you'll understand the letters, the promise he made to us." Confused, Silas reached into his saddlebag, pulling out the papers the lawyer had given him. The deed, a handful of legal documents, nothing more. "I have no letters, just these," he said, spreading the papers in his hands as if they might explain everything. The elder woman nodded slowly, raising a calming hand to a woman named Clarabelle, who had been eyeing Silas with wary suspicion. "Give him time, Clarabelle. He's just arrived." Silas felt the invisible tug of disbelief on one side and a dawning sense of responsibility on the other. This wasn't just a ranch. It was a promise sealed long ago, a legacy passed down through blood and quiet sacrifices. But it could also be a trap, a burden heavier than any he'd ever carried. His mind raced back to the life he had known, distant from this forgotten corner of Wyoming, shaped by solitude and hard work, never imagining he'd inherit more than a name. And now, here he stood, at a crossroads that demanded more than just a choice. It demanded courage. The women exchanged glances, their eyes silently pleading for reassurance, for proof, for something beyond words. The green-eyed woman, holding her photograph tightly, finally broke the silence. "Your grandfather said you'd come, that you'd bring the letters. They'll explain everything. They're your key to understanding what this place really means." Silas shook his head, frustration and confusion mingling in his chest. "Nobody told me about letters. The lawyer only gave me these documents." His voice softened, betraying the weight of uncertainty. Maggie, the silver-haired woman, stepped forward, her gaze steady and kind. "Sometimes the truth is kept until you're ready to hear it. Your grandfather knew that." The wind picked up, tugging at the loose strands of Silas's hair, and the ranch seemed to breathe around them. The creaking of the porch boards, the distant call of a lone owl, the faint rustle of drying clothes on the line. It was alive with secrets, with memories, with waiting. Silas realized that this inheritance was more than land and buildings. It was a charge, a responsibility woven into the fabric of this place and the lives it sheltered. Walking away might be easy, slipping back into the comfort of the known, but would he have the strength to leave these women to face what they had already endured? He looked once more at the faces before him. The weathered skin, the calloused hands, the eyes that had survived storms he could only imagine. They were waiting not just for an heir, but for a protector. His jaw tightened. The cold air bit at his skin, but a fire sparked within. This was no longer just about inheritance. It was about honoring a promise, one he might not remember but could no longer deny. "I'll stay," Silas said at last, voice low but resolute. "Tell me about the letters." The women exchanged relieved glances, and Maggie nodded approvingly. "Come inside, Silas. There's much to show you, and time isn't on our side." As the porch light flickered on and shadows stretched long across the yard, Silas followed them into the house that was more than a home. It was a sanctuary built on courage, sacrifice, and a hope that refused to die. Outside, the Wyoming dusk deepened, the wilderness holding its breath, waiting to see what fate the night would bring. The heavy wooden door creaked shut behind Silas as he stepped inside the dimly lit ranch house. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke and worn leather, a scent that seemed to hold years of stories and silent resilience. The 7 women gathered quietly in a loose circle around him, their eyes steady but filled with a deep, unspoken history. The walls were adorned with photographs, images of a young boy playing on the very porch where Silas now stood. The boy's laughter seemed almost to echo in the stillness, a stark contrast to the weight settling in Silas's chest. Faces long forgotten flickered through his mind, memories tangled and blurred by the fever that had stolen much of his childhood. Maggie, the silver-haired woman whose presence commanded a quiet respect, broke the silence with a gentle voice. "You were here many times before," she said softly. "Before that fever took your memories from you. We waited for you to return, to honor the promise made by a boy and a grandfather who loved him." Silas's eyes fell upon a faded drawing resting on the worn wooden table. It showed 7 stick figures standing before the ranch house, scrawled in the unsteady hand of a child. Beneath the drawing, the words, "My friends at Grandpa's house," trembled with innocence and hope, a fragile link to a forgotten past. Around him, the women's faces told their own stories, lines etched by hardship, eyes that had witnessed too much, yet glimmering with a quiet strength. They spoke without words of broken marriages, homes shattered by violence and betrayal, husbands who had once promised protection but instead brought only pain, men who vanished without explanation one tragic month, swallowed by the collapse of a nearby mine, a disaster that was anything but accidental. Silas felt the silence deepen, a heavy stillness that seemed to bind them all. This was more than coincidence. These women were survivors, bound not only by circumstance but by a shared history of escape, endurance, and silent rebellion. And now, Silas realized, he was the thread woven through their fractured stories, the link between past and present, promise and protection. Each woman met his gaze with a mixture of expectation and cautious hope, as if asking silently, "Will you remember? Will you stand with us?" As the fading daylight filtered through cracked window panes, Silas's heart tightened. The memories that had once been lost were stirring, not as clear images, but as a pulse beneath his skin, a call to stand firm, to reclaim what had been broken. In that quiet room, filled with shadows and whispers, the fragile bonds of trust began to form. Silas was no longer a stranger to this place or its people. He was part of a story that demanded courage, understanding, and above all, the strength to face what lay ahead together. The past was no longer a distant ache. It was a living, breathing force, shaping the future of the ranch, the women, and the man who had finally come home. Each shadow on the weathered walls, every creak in the floorboards, spoke of stories etched deep beneath the surface. Stories of survival, sacrifice, and the unyielding will to protect what little hope remained. Silas moved slowly through the room, his fingers trailing along the edges of photographs hanging unevenly on the walls. There were pictures of the women in younger days, faces full of promise, not yet hardened by loss. He noticed one of himself, a boy no older than 10, standing beside his grandfather on this very porch. The sunlight in the photo caught the edges of the old man's worn hat, and Silas felt a pang of longing for a time he couldn't fully recall, a time lost in the fog of fever and forgotten promises. Maggie's voice softened as she began to recount the earliest days, her eyes distant but steady. Your grandfather wasn't just a rancher. He was a man who knew the weight of the world on his shoulders. He saw what these women endured, what their husbands did to them. He made a promise to protect them when no one else would. She glanced around at the others, each nodding solemnly. He gave us this place, this sanctuary. But it wasn't just land or shelter. It was a new life, a chance to rebuild from the ashes of broken homes. Silas swallowed hard, his throat tight. He could almost hear the quiet despair that must have once filled these rooms, the whispered fears in the dark, the stolen moments of peace snatched between storms of violence. Yet beneath it all there was something else, a fierce hope that refused to be extinguished. The women shared their stories slowly, each confession a thread weaving together the tapestry of their lives. One spoke of nights spent hiding bruises beneath heavy scarves, of children clinging to trembling mothers. Another recalled the day her husband's anger turned toward her sister's children, a line that once crossed meant there was no going back. They told of betrayals, of being sold like cattle to feed a husband's addiction or greed. And then, of the collapse, the mine accident that had taken the lives of 7 men, a disaster engineered with grim purpose. Silas listened, absorbing every word, feeling the weight of their pain and the gravity of his role. These women had been waiting for him, not just as an heir to property, but as the guardian of their survival, the keeper of promises whispered long ago. The photographs they held, the memories they kept alive, were reminders that the past was tangled with the present in ways he was only beginning to understand. He thought about the long nights his grandfather must have spent planning and protecting, knowing that one day the burden would fall on Silas's shoulders, a burden of blood, loyalty, and justice. As the evening shadows lengthened, Silas found himself drawn to a worn, leather-bound journal resting on the table. Mercy, the youngest among them, offered it to him quietly. He wrote everything down about you, about us, about the promise. Said you'd need to know when you were ready. Opening the journal, Silas traced the careful handwriting that spanned years. Notes about their lives, about the dangers they faced, and the hope that one day, the boy who had once played on this porch would return to finish what had been started. It was more than a ledger. It was a testament to resilience, a call to arms wrapped in ink and leather. The weight of the past was no longer something to fear or avoid. It was a compass pointing toward a future only they could forge together. The ranch was no longer just property. It was a symbol of survival, a beacon for those who refused to be broken. Silas looked up from the journal and met the eyes of each woman around him. There was no need for words. The bond was forged in shared history and the quiet understanding that they stood united against whatever storms were yet to come. Outside, the wind swept through the trees, carrying with it the promise of change. The night was dark, but within the walls of that old ranch house, a new kind of light was beginning to burn. A light born of courage, trust, and a love that had weathered the harshest of trials. Silas knew the road ahead would not be easy. There would be battles to fight, shadows to confront, and sacrifices to make. But for the first time in a long while, he felt the stirrings of something powerful within him, an unshakable resolve to protect these women, this land, and the legacy entrusted to him. The past was a living story, not a ghost to haunt him, but a foundation on which to build a future where justice could finally take root, where love could heal old wounds, and where freedom was more than a dream. And so, beneath the vast Wyoming sky, surrounded by those who had waited and hoped for so long, Silas Ward began the journey home. Not just to a ranch, but to a destiny he was only now beginning to understand. The heavy air inside the ranch house grew thicker as the women began to peel back the layers of their past, layers they had long kept hidden beneath smiles, silence, and survival. The fire flickered low in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across faces marked by pain and endurance. Silas sat quietly among them, the weight of their stories settling around him like dust on old wood. Clarabelle was the first to speak in detail, her voice steady but laden with years of suffering. She rolled up the sleeve of her worn shirt, revealing faded scars that stretched from her wrist to her elbow, silent testament to nights spent bracing against fists that should have been gentle. "This," she said, her fingers tracing a particularly jagged line, "is what he left me." She didn't need to say more. The bruises beneath her skin spoke volumes. The room held a collective breath as Mercy, the youngest, swallowed hard and shared her own harrowing truth. "I was sold once," she whispered, voice trembling but determined. "Sold for a bottle of whiskey, like I was nothing but property. I lost more than time. I lost trust." Another woman's eyes darkened as she recounted her story, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "He broke my arm twice, once my ribs, said it was his right, his way to discipline me." She looked at Silas directly, her gaze raw. There was no safety in his house, no refuge in his arms. One by one, the women unveiled the brutal realities that had forced them to seek refuge here. Husbands who brought not protection but violence, who betrayed the sacred bond of marriage with cruelty and neglect. Men who gambled away the family's food and dignity, who sold their wives' bodies to pay debts that should never have been theirs to bear. Silas listened, his heart tightening with every confession. The room, filled moments ago with guarded hope, now thrummed with the echoes of pain long endured. Yet beneath the sorrow, he sensed an unbroken thread, a fierce determination to survive, to reclaim what had been stolen. Then the darkest secret emerged, heavier than any before. Their husbands' deaths were no accident. Silas's breath caught as Maggie's voice cut through the silence. "That mind collapse. It was never an accident. It was a choice, a desperate bid for freedom." She paused, eyes glistening with memories that refused to fade. "Your grandfather knew the mine was unstable. He knew it would collapse eventually, but he made sure it happened when it could save us, when it would bury the men who had made our lives hell." The women nodded solemnly, their faces etched with grief and reluctant relief. It was a truth buried beneath years of secrecy, a truth that was as dark as it was necessary. Silas's mind reeled. The man he barely knew, his grandfather, had become a guardian in ways he never imagined, an architect of escape from a life that had been unbearable. The ranch was not just a home. It was a fortress, a sanctuary built on sacrifice and silent rebellion. He thought of the letters he had yet to see, the promises made in ink and blood, the burden of protection now resting squarely on his shoulders. "Why tell me this now?" Silas asked quietly, his voice barely more than a breath. "Because," Clarabelle answered, "we've lived in the shadow of fear for too long. Your arrival changes everything. It's time the truth had a witness, someone who carries our story forward." The room settled into a fragile peace, a moment suspended between past suffering and the possibility of a different future. Silas felt a quiet vow form within him, a promise whispered not in words but in the steady meeting of eyes and the clasping of hands. He was no longer just an heir to land. He was a guardian of lives that had been broken and stitched back together by courage. Silas rose, his shoulders heavier but his heart steadier. "I don't know what comes next," he admitted, "but I will stand with you, whatever it takes." Maggie reached out, her hand firm on his arm. That's all we needed to hear. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the ghosts of the past and the hope of new beginnings. Inside the old ranch house, beneath the flickering firelight, a pact was made. Between the protector and the protected, between memory and future, between pain and healing. Silas understood then that this inheritance was not just land or property, but a sacred trust, a legacy of love forged in the harshest fires, and he was ready to carry it forward, not as a burden, but as a promise. The weight of that promise settled over him like a cloak, heavy yet comforting, weaving itself into every fiber of his being. It was a responsibility far beyond anything he had imagined, beyond deeds and legal papers, beyond simple ownership. This was about people, lives intertwined by pain and survival, by whispered vows and unbreakable bonds. For a long moment, Silas stood silent in the flickering glow of the firelight, watching the faces around him. The women who had weathered storms he could barely fathom, who had built their fragile sanctuary from the ruins of shattered pasts. Their strength was raw and unyielding, tempered by loss yet illuminated by hope. He thought back to the stories, the nights spent in fear, the hidden scars both seen and unseen, the sacrifices made in silence. These women had given everything to claim a measure of freedom, to escape the darkness of violence and betrayal. And now, they had offered him a place among them, a chance to stand as their protector, their keeper of promises. This was no ordinary ranch. It was a refuge, a beacon of resilience amidst a wilderness both physical and emotional. It was a testament to the courage of those who refused to be broken. Silas's mind drifted to his grandfather, the man whose footsteps he was now called to follow. A man who had seen the cruelty lurking beneath the surface of this rugged land and had chosen to fight it in the only way he could, by sheltering the vulnerable, by creating a place where broken souls might find healing. He imagined the quiet strength it had taken for his grandfather to orchestrate such a daring act, to arrange for the collapse of that mine with cold calculation, not out of malice, but out of desperate love. A love fierce enough to rewrite fate itself, to shield 7 women from lives that promised only suffering. The realization stirred something deep within Silas, a stirring that was part awe, part resolve. He was the heir not only to land but to a mission, to protect, to honor, to ensure that this sanctuary endured. He looked around again at the women, their faces marked by hardship but lit with a stubborn light that refused to fade. They had fought their battles quietly, alone for so long, and now they were no longer alone. Silas was their shield, their voice, their strength. Yet with that strength came a sobering truth. The challenges ahead would be formidable. There would be forces outside this house, men driven by greed, by power, by a desire to tear down what had been built here with so much pain and sacrifice. Silas knew he would have to stand firm against them, not just with guns or fists, but with wisdom, with unshakable resolve, and with the kind of courage that comes from knowing you carry more than just your own life on your shoulders. He thought of the nights to come, of the long hours spent learning every corner of this land, every creak and shadow in the house, of the bonds he would forge with these women, built on trust and shared purpose. The inheritance was a living thing, breathing with memories and hopes, and it demanded more than ownership. It demanded stewardship. Silas felt a swell of pride mingled with humility. This was not the life he had planned, but it was the one he was meant to live. His heart, once weighed down by uncertainty and loss, now beat with a steady rhythm of determination. The road ahead might be steep and perilous, but he would walk it with open eyes and an unyielding spirit. He would carry forward the legacy of love forged in fire, not as a burden, but as a promise. The promise to protect those who had survived the darkness. The promise to honor a grandfather's silent sacrifices. The promise to build a future where freedom and healing could grow like wildflowers on these rugged Wyoming plains. As the fire crackled softly, Silas finally spoke, his voice low but sure. "I don't know what comes next, but I know one thing. This ranch, this family, this promise, they're mine to keep." Maggie smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling with relief and hope. "You carry more than land, Silas. You carry all our futures." And in that moment, surrounded by those who had waited so long for him, Silas Ward stepped fully into his inheritance. Not just as an owner, but as a protector, a guardian, and a man reborn by the strength of a promise kept. Outside, the Wyoming night stretched wide and endless, stars shining like distant fires, a reminder that even in the darkest skies, light could be found, carried forward by those brave enough to hold it. As dusk bled into night, a heavy tension settled over the ranch. The peaceful silence of the Wyoming foothills shattered with the sharp clatter of horses' hooves pounding hard against the earth. 3 men approached through the shadows, their silhouettes framed by the fading light, armed, confident, and intent on taking what they believed was theirs. These were land speculators, men who dealt not in kindness, but in threats and coercion. Their voices cut through the stillness like a whip cracking in the dark. "Ladies," the leader called out, his tone dripping with false politeness. "We know you're in there. We've got papers for you, business to settle." The sound of rattling guns echoed ominously, and somewhere nearby, the sharp shatter of breaking glass sent a jolt through the house. Inside, the 7 women exchanged glances, eyes fierce despite the fear that whispered in their bones. Armed with nothing more than a single rifle and an iron will born of years spent guarding what little sanctuary they had, they steeled themselves against the storm closing in. Silas emerged from the shadows of the house, his figure calm but resolute. In his hands, he carried the last line of defense, a leather portfolio thick with legal documents his grandfather had meticulously prepared. These were no ordinary papers. They contained the proof that the ranch was not simply inherited, but had been sold to Silas in a secret agreement sealed 5 years earlier, an act designed to protect the land and those who dwelled upon it. The men sneered at his presence, but their confidence faltered as Silas laid the documents before them. "This ranch belongs to me," he said quietly, "not by the vague words of inheritance, but by the law of the land, signed, sealed, and recorded." A murmur passed among the invaders, the sharp edge of certainty beginning to dull. But Silas was not finished. He reached into the folder again and pulled out recent correspondence, reports from the federal marshal's office detailing new evidence that turned the story on its head. The 7 men who had perished in the mine collapse were not innocent victims, but thieves caught in the act, their downfall orchestrated by their own greed and betrayal. This revelation cast the speculators in a new light. The very men who now sought to claim the ranch had ties to the criminal deeds of those dead husbands. The federal authorities were actively investigating, offering substantial rewards for information leading to the recovery of stolen gold hidden nearby. The tables had turned. The leader's face paled as he realized their leverage had slipped through their fingers like sand. Their threats now rang hollow, their guns mere props in a drama they no longer controlled. Clarabelle stepped forward, rifle steady in her hands, a steely glint in her eyes. "You'll find no easy victims here," she warned, voice cold as steel. "This land and these women are protected, not just by law, but by those who refuse to be broken." Silas stood tall beside her, his courage rooted not in weapons but in promises long whispered and never forgotten. The weight of his grandfather's legacy settled on his shoulders like armor, shielding them all from the dark forces that had once threatened to consume this refuge. The invaders exchanged glances, weighing their options. With federal law enforcement poised to intervene and the ranch legally secure under Silas's name, their path forward was uncertain. Slowly, reluctantly, they retreated into the night, their silhouettes swallowed by the shadows from which they came. As silence reclaimed the ranch, a profound stillness settled over the group, a silence filled not with fear, but with the quiet victory of justice served. Maggie's voice broke through, soft but resolute. "Your grandfather would be proud," she said, looking at Silas with a warmth that spoke of gratitude and hope. "You've found a way to protect us without becoming what we feared." Silas exhaled deeply, the tension leaving his body like a long-held breath finally released. Around him, the women began to relax, their faces softening as the night's danger passed. The ranch was no longer a vulnerable sanctuary. It was a fortress of justice and hope, built not on fear, but on love, courage, and the strength of promises kept. Outside, the Wyoming stars glittered cold and clear against the velvet sky, witnesses to a new beginning born from the ashes of hardship. Silas knew the road ahead would still hold challenges, but for the first time, he felt ready to face whatever storms might come, armed with the truth, the law, and the unwavering spirit of those he now called family. Together, they would rebuild, not just a ranch, but lives reclaimed from pain and shadows. Together, they would write a new chapter, one forged in courage and sealed by the promise of freedom. The past had tested them, but the future was theirs to claim. And Silas Ward, once a stranger to this land and its people, had finally come home.